Welcome to Silent Case Files. Tonight we arrive at a place where the sea never sleeps, the fog never lifts, and secrets are buried deeper than the ocean itself. A lonely lighthouse guesthouse stands at the edge of the world, welcoming travelers with warm lights, but hiding something far colder in the shadows. This is Murder at the Lighthouse Guesthouse, a Hercule-Style mystery where isolation becomes a weapon and every guest is a suspect. Because when the storm traps everyone inside, there is no escape and no one to trust. A body has been discovered, the waves erase every footprint, and the lighthouse beam sweeps across the darkness like a silent witness, searching for the truth. What happened behind those locked doors? Who came here with a hidden purpose? And why does the sea seem to guard the killer's secret? Stay with us, because in this case, the light does not guide, it reveals. This is Silent Case Files, and the mystery begins. It was, I confess, one of those mornings in which England seems determined to outdo itself in dreariness. A fine mist hung over the coastline like a veil of mourning, the sea beyond shifting restlessly beneath a sky the color of pewter. The gulls cried out with an almost accusing sharpness, and the wind carried with it that peculiar salt-scented chill which seeps not only into one's coat but into one's bones. We had come, Hercule Poirot and I, to the small seaside village of Wycliffe Bay, a place so quiet that one might imagine crime itself would be too ashamed to enter. And yet, as I have learned through my association with Poirot, it is precisely in such tranquil corners that the darkest passions often lie concealed. The invitation had arrived 3 days earlier, written on thick cream paper, the handwriting elegant but strained as though the writer's composure had been carefully constructed over something trembling beneath. Monsieur Poirot, I beg you to come at once to the Lighthouse Guesthouse. A matter of the utmost delicacy threatens to become unbearable. I cannot explain fully by letter. Only trust that discretion is essential. Cordelia Fane Poirot had read it twice, his green eyes narrowing slightly. A lady who writes with restraint, he murmured, tapping the page with one precise finger. And yet she bleeds anxiety between every line. You think it's serious? I asked. Poirot gave a small shrug. Mon ami, people do not summon Hercule Poirot for trifles. They summon him because something is already broken or about to break. And so we came, the Lighthouse Guesthouse. The guesthouse stood on a cliff road, its white-painted walls stark against the grey sky. Behind it rose the old lighthouse itself, no longer active, but still looming like a silent sentinel over the sea. Inside, warmth met us immediately, the smell of polished wood, coal smoke and something faintly floral. A woman hurried forward at once. She was perhaps 45, tall and composed, though her hands betrayed her by twisting tightly together. Her face was handsome rather than pretty, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that had clearly not slept. Monsieur Poirot? Poirot bowed with his usual courtly grace. Mademoiselle Cordelia Fane. You honor me. Oh, I assure you, the honor is mine. Her voice faltered. I did not know where else to turn. Poirot's moustache quivered faintly. You have done wisely. Come, let us sit, and you will tell me everything. Cordelia led us into a drawing-room, tasteful but slightly oppressive, too orderly, too controlled. It struck me suddenly that this was a house in which emotions were not permitted to spill freely. Cordelia poured tea with hands that trembled despite her effort. Before she could speak, a voice drifted in from the doorway. Well, well, the famous Belgian himself. A man stood there, tall and lean, his expression amused but his eyes sharp. Cordelia stiffened. This is Mr. Julian Harrow, she said tightly. One of our guests. Harrow inclined his head. I hope you've come to entertain us, Poirot. This place can be dreadfully dull. Poirot smiled politely. I do not entertain, monsieur. I observe. Harrow's smile thinned. Ah, then we must all be on our best behavior. He sauntered away. Cordelia exhaled as though she had been holding her breath. Poirot's gaze lingered thoughtfully on the doorway. An interesting man, he murmured. You do not approve. Poirot lifted a hand. I approve of nothing until I know the truth. A closed circle, Cordelia gathered herself. There are 6 guests here at present, she began. The season is nearly over, but I keep the house open for select visitors. 6. Poirot repeated. A most tidy number. Cordelia's lips pressed together. Tidy, yes, though nothing feels tidy anymore. She listed them carefully. Julian Harrow, a novelist of some reputation, charming and unsettling. Miss Beatrice Sloane, an elderly woman of sharp tongue and sharper eyes. Dr. Edmund Shaw, quiet, scholarly, recently retired. Mrs. Lavinia Croft, a widow, fashionable and brittle. Mr. Simon Vetch, a young businessman, eager and restless. And lastly, Cordelia hesitated. Sir Alistair Pembroke. At the name, Poirot's expression altered almost imperceptibly. "Ah, you know of him? Who does not?" Poirot murmured. "A man of wealth, of influence, and, I suspect, of enemies." Cordelia's voice dropped. "He arrived 3 nights ago. Since then, the atmosphere here has changed. There are tensions, glances, silences." Poirot leaned forward. "And why, mademoiselle, does Sir Alistair disturb you so?" Cordelia swallowed. "Because I believe something terrible is going to happen." Hastings that I am, I could not help blurting out, "My dear madam, surely you exaggerate. These are respectable people." Poirot shot me a glance. "Respectable people, mon ami, are often the most dangerous when pushed." Cordelia's eyes glistened. "This morning Sir Alistair told me he intended to make an announcement tonight, something that would change everything." Poirot's voice was very gentle. "And you fear what that announcement will provoke?" Cordelia nodded. "Yes." Poirot sat back, steepling his fingers. "Mademoiselle, you have done the correct thing. You have invited me before the crime, not after." Cordelia gave a short, humorless laugh. "If only I were certain we are not already too late." The murder. The scream came at precisely 11 minutes past noon. It sliced through the guest house like a knife. Cordelia shot to her feet, her teacup shattering on the tray. Poirot rose instantly, his movements controlled. "Where did it come from?" "Upstairs," Cordelia whispered. "Sir Alistair's rooms." We ran. I confess, my heart pounded in that familiar mixture of dread and excitement that always precedes disaster. At the top of the stairs, Miss Beatrice Sloane stood frozen, one hand pressed to her throat. Her eyes were wide. The door, it was open. Poirot brushed past her. The room beyond was dim, the curtains half drawn. Sir Alistair Pembroke lay sprawled beside the writing desk, one arm outstretched as though reaching for something just beyond his grasp. His face was strangely calm, but there was a dark stain spreading across his chest. Cordelia gave a strangled sound. "No." Poirot knelt, his expression unreadable. He touched the man's wrist, lightly. Then he stood. "It is done," he said quietly. "He is dead." For a moment the sea wind moaned against the lighthouse outside, as though even nature itself mourned. Then Poirot spoke again, softly but with steel beneath. "And now, mes amis." His eyes swept the room, the hallway, the faces gathering behind us. "We begin. The crime has been committed. The suspects are already present, and Hercule Poirot has arrived just in time, or perhaps already too late." Poirot stood very still, as though the room were a chessboard and he must first see every piece. His gaze traveled from the fallen chair to the half-drawn curtains, from the desk with its neat stacks to the dead man's outstretched hand. "Do not touch anything," he said quietly, yet the words fell with the weight of authority. Even Harrow's smile faltered briefly. Then, Cordelia Fane made a sound like a caught breath and swayed. I steadied her and guided her to the chair. In the doorway the others had gathered with unnatural speed. Mrs. Lavinia Croft came first, in a plum dressing gown, her hair arranged with stubborn elegance. Dr. Shaw followed, spectacles askew, his face drained but his manner controlled. Simon Vetch hovered behind them, breathing too hard. Julian Harrow leaned against the frame as though the scene were a stage. Miss Sloane peered over a shoulder, eyes bright and hungry. "What has happened?" Mrs. Croft demanded. Poirot inclined his head toward the body. "Sir Alistair Pembroke is dead, madame." A ripple ran through the group. Shock, disbelief, something dangerously close to relief. Simon took a step forward, then stopped. "Dead? But he was at breakfast." "Indeed," Poirot murmured. "And now he is not." Dr. Shaw moved in with professional briskness, knelt, and examined the wound and the pupils. When he rose, he spoke in a low voice. "A single stab. He died quickly." Mrs. Croft pressed her fingers to her lips. Miss Sloane's glance slid to the desk. Then to Poirot, as though measuring what he might permit himself to see. Harrow's expression returned, amused. "We must send for the police," Cordelia managed. "Certainly," Poirot said. "But first, order. Until the police arrive, no one leaves the grounds of the guest house." "You can't mean to detain us," Mrs. Croft said sharply. "I mean precisely that," Poirot replied, still polite. "This is a closed circle, and it would be inconvenient if it opened." Simon's colour rose. "This is ridiculous. We're respectable, and respectable people," Poirot interrupted gently, "are capable of every passion. Now, Mademoiselle Sloane, you were the first at the door." "I was," she said at once. "I was passing along the corridor. The door was ajar. I looked in. I saw him. I screamed. Quite naturally." "Quite," Poirot agreed. "At that moment, where were the rest of you?" "Madame Croft, in my room, writing letters. Dr. Shaw, in the sitting room downstairs with the newspaper. Mr. Vetch, in the hall. I was going out for a walk. And Monsieur Harrow, on the terrace," Harrow said, "smoking and contemplating the sea. A harmless vice and a harmless view." Poirot nodded, filing each phrase away with the care of a librarian. "And who saw Sir Alistair last, alive?" A reluctant silence answered him. Then Cordelia spoke, her voice raw. "I did. 10 minutes before the scream. He rang for me." "Why?" Poirot asked. He was angry. "Frightened," he said. Someone had entered his room at breakfast. A document was missing. He demanded to know who had a key. Mrs. Croft gave a small, brittle laugh. "A document? Of course." Harrow's eyes flicked to her. "Careful, Lavinia. Your innocence sounds rehearsed." Poirot lifted a hand, quieting them. "Mademoiselle Cordelia, what did you tell him?" "That the rooms have ordinary locks. There is a master key kept in my office. Only I and the maid have access." "The maid?" Poirot's tone was mild, but his attention sharpened. "Elsie went into the village early for supplies," Cordelia said. "She won't return until afternoon." Poirot's moustache twitched. "So, a missing document. An announcement intended for this evening. And now, murder." He looked from face to face. "You will all come downstairs to the drawing-room. We will wait together. We will not wander about." As we moved out into the corridor, my eye caught a tiny glint near the skirting board, like a fallen bead of light. I instinctively bent, but Poirot's hand closed on my sleeve. "Non. Hastings. You see, and you remember. That is sufficient." Downstairs the drawing-room felt altered, as though the walls had drawn closer. The wind worried at the windows. Somewhere beyond, the sea kept its indifferent rhythm. Mrs. Croft sat very straight, hands folded as if in prayer. Dr. Shaw stood by the mantel, staring at nothing. Simon Vetch attempted to sit, rose again, then finally forced himself down. Miss Sloane watched everyone with tireless appetite. Harrow lounged, almost comfortable to watch. Poirot took the chair opposite them, small and composed, like a judge who has not yet chosen to speak. "Tell me," he said at last, softly, "in these last 3 days, what has Sir Alistair done to each of you? Because I think you know that he has done something, and that is why he lies upstairs, so still." A silence followed Poirot's question, the sort of silence that seems to thicken the air. Outside, the wind gave a long moan around the lighthouse, as though it too listened. Poirot remained perfectly still, his hands folded, his eyes attentive yet unreadable. It was extraordinary how he could appear so mild and yet compel the room to answer him. Mrs. Croft was the first to speak. Her voice clipped. "Sir Alistair did nothing to me. I scarcely know the man." Poirot inclined his head. "And yet, madam, you laughed when the missing document was mentioned." Her cheeks coloured. "Because it is typical of such men. Is it not? Always papers, always secrets. They imagine themselves important." Harrow's mouth curved. "Some of them are." Poirot's gaze flickered toward him. "Monsieur Harrow, perhaps you will tell me your own acquaintance with Sir Alistair." Harrow stretched his long legs. "I met him once in London. He disliked my books. I disliked his politics. We agreed to avoid one another. Fate, apparently, had other plans. And yet you came to this guest house at the same time." Harrow's smile sharpened. "Coincidence is such a charming word, Poirot. Miss Sloane leaned forward eagerly. "I can tell you what he did," she said. "He upset everyone. He came here as though he owned the place. He spoke in whispers with Dr. Shaw. He argued with Mr. Vetch in the hall, and last night I heard Mrs. Croft crying in her room." Mrs. Croft's head snapped up. "You ridiculous old woman." "Ridiculous, perhaps," Miss Sloane replied sweetly, "but I have ears." Poirot held up a hand. "One at a time. Dr. Shaw, you spoke with Sir Alistair." Dr. Shaw adjusted his spectacles. His hands were steady, but his mouth tightened. "He approached me because of my former work. He asked certain questions of a private nature." "Private?" "Medical," Shaw said shortly. "I see no reason to elaborate." Poirot nodded as though he understood entirely. "And you, Mr. Vetch?" "Miss Sloane says you argued with him." Simon Vetch swallowed. "He accused me of something, of trying to obtain money under false pretenses. It was insulting." "Was it true?" Poirot asked gently. Vetch flushed. "No, of course not." Poirot did not press further. Instead he turned to Cordelia. "Mademoiselle Fane, Sir Alistair chose your guest house for a reason." "What reason?" Cordelia's fingers twisted together again. "He said he wanted quiet. He said he was tired of London. He wanted to think." Poirot murmured, "Or to decide." A faint sound came from the hallway. A creak, a footstep. Everyone stiffened. Poirot rose at once and opened the door. Elsie, the maid, stood there with a basket of provisions, her face paling as she saw the gathering. "Miss Cordelia?" "What?" Cordelia hurried to her. "Elsie, you must go at once to the village and fetch the police." Elsie's eyes widened. "Police? Has something happened?" Poirot's voice was gentle. "A terrible thing, my child. Do as you are told." Elsie nodded rapidly and fled again, the basket abandoned on the floor. Poirot returned to his chair, but his eyes lingered thoughtfully on the hallway beyond. "Now," he said softly, "I will ask something very simple. Who knew of the announcement Sir Alistair intended to make tonight?" No one answered. Poirot's tone remained mild. "You see, it is always the same. The truth is a stone in the shoe. It irritates. It cannot be ignored. Someone here feared what he would say." Mrs. Croft's laugh was brittle. "You assume it was something dreadful." Poirot smiled faintly. "Madame, announcements that bring joy do not usually end with a knife in the heart." At that, Dr. Shaw's composure slipped for the first time. His eyes darted toward the window. "A knife," he murmured. "We haven't even discussed the weapon." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "No, we have not, and yet you speak of it." Shaw stiffened. "I only meant—" Poirot waved it away. "We will discuss it when the police arrive. For now, let us return to the room upstairs." A murmur of protest rose. "Surely that is unnecessary," began Mrs. Croft. "It is necessary," Poirot replied, "because the room tells stories, if one knows how to listen." Reluctantly, they followed as Poirot led the way back up the stairs. The corridor seemed colder now, the very air altered by violence. Poirot paused outside Sir Alistair's door, studying the lock, the threshold, the angle at which the door stood open. Inside, the body lay as before. The stain on the carpet had darkened. Poirot moved slowly around the desk, not touching, only observing. His eyes fell upon the writing surface. There were papers neatly arranged, an envelope addressed but not sealed, and beside the inkstand a space, an absence, as though something had been removed with care. Poirot's gaze travelled to Sir Alistair's outstretched hand. The fingers were slightly curled, clutching nothing, but on the cuff of his sleeve, barely visible, was a smear, dark, not blood, but ink. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah," he murmured. "So, he tried to write, or he tried to stop someone from writing." Harrow's voice drifted from behind. "You sound almost pleased, Poirot." Poirot did not turn. "I am never pleased by murder, monsieur, but I am interested." Then, very softly, as though speaking only to himself, he added, "And I think our dead man was killed not for what he had done, but for what he was about to reveal." Poirot remained by the desk a moment longer, his head slightly inclined, as though the murdered man were whispering to him from the carpet. Then he straightened, brushed an invisible speck from his sleeve, and turned to us with that air of courteous finality which meant he had taken in far more than he meant to share. "We return downstairs," he said. "The arrival of the police is imminent, and it is best they find us composed." Below, the front bell clanged, followed by the heavy tread of boots. Elsie's voice rose, breathless. A moment later, 2 constables entered, and behind them a stout man in a dark overcoat, with a face like a weathered apple. "Inspector Gryce," he announced briskly, eyeing the company as though we were parcels to be labelled. "Now then, who's in charge?" Poirot stepped forward with a little bow. "You have the honor, Inspector, to speak with Hercule Poirot." Gryce blinked, recognition struggling with irritation. "Poirot? Very well. Where's the body?" "Upstairs, in Sir Alistair's room." Gryce gave a low whistle. "Knife work," he said. "Clean enough." "Doctor?" "Doctor." Shaw repeated his brief assessment. Gryce nodded, then bent to peer beneath the desk and along the skirting board. His eyes snagged on the window latch. "Windows fastened," he muttered. "Door ajar. Looks like the killer came in bold as brass, or the victim opened it." Poirot murmured, "Or for her." Gryce ignored that and began ordering the constables about. Notes taken, hands examined, rooms searched. He questioned Cordelia first, taking down her statement with the air of a man who already knew the shape of events. When he came to the guests, the atmosphere sharpened. Mrs. Croft's indignation returned. "This is outrageous," she declared. "I demand to telephone my solicitor." "You'll demand nothing until I'm done," Gryce snapped. He fixed his eyes on Vetch. "You said you were going out for a walk when the scream came." "Yes," Simon said, licking his lips. "I'd just opened the front door." "Any witness to that?" "No, only Elsie, perhaps, passing through the hall." Elsie, summoned, nodded nervously. "I saw Mr. Vetch by the coat stand, sir, as I came in. He looked startled." "Startled because of the scream," Vetch protested. "Or because he'd not expected anyone to return so soon." Miss Sloane put in, her voice sugar-sweet. Gryce glared at her. "You will keep quiet unless spoken to." He moved on to Harrow. "And you claim you were on the terrace?" Harrow lifted his eyebrows. "Yes, Inspector. The sea can testify. Anyone see you?" Cordelia hesitated. "I passed the window once. I did see Mr. Harrow outside." Harrow's smile was faintly mocking. "How kind of you to remember." Gryce's gaze went to Mrs. Croft. "You were writing letters." "I was," she said, chin raised. "In my own room." "May I see the letters?" She stiffened. "Certainly not." "Certainly yes," Gryce replied. One constable shifted meaningfully. For an instant Mrs. Croft's composure cracked. A flash of fear crossed her face before it was smoothed away. Poirot watched, fingers steepled, as though that flicker were a signal. At last Gryce returned to the drawing-room with grim satisfaction. "Right," he said. "I've found your weapon." From a brown paper parcel he produced a small, wicked-looking dagger, its hilt carved in ivory. There were dark smears along the blade. Cordelia gave a stifled cry. "That? Where did you find it?" "In the linen cupboard outside the victim's room," Gryce said, "wrapped in a towel." "Anyone care to explain?" Every eye went, as if by instinct, to Dr. Shaw. For a heartbeat, Shaw did not move. Then he said quietly, "That dagger belongs to me." The room seemed to contract. Vetch made a small sound like a choking laugh. Miss Sloane's eyes shone. Harrow's gaze sharpened at last into genuine interest. "It was a gift," Dr. Shaw continued, controlled. "A souvenir. I keep it as a curiosity. I have not used it." Gryce's voice hardened. "Yet it's in the cupboard near the dead man's room with blood on it." "That's not a curiosity, Doctor. That's evidence." Poirot's eyes rested on Shaw's face, thoughtful and almost kind. "And you say, Dr. Shaw," he asked softly, "that you did not use it. Then tell me, when did you last see it in your own possession?" Dr. Shaw swallowed. "Yesterday evening," he said. "It was in my suitcase. I showed it to Sir Alistair, at his request. He admired the workmanship. He even laughed, which surprised me. He rubbed his brow. Afterward I returned it to my room. At least I believed I did. This morning when the commotion began I had no thought to look." Gryce snorted. Convenient. Poirot's head tilted. Perhaps. But tell me, Inspector, if Dr. Shaw killed, would he hide his own dagger so clumsily? Not, I think, his. Inspector Gryce's heavy face reddened at Poirot's mild question, as though he resented logic when it contradicted the satisfying simplicity of accusation. People do foolish things in a panic, he growled. Doctor's dagger, doctor near the scene, doctor with private talks with the victim. Looks tidy enough to me. Tidy, Poirot echoed softly, as though tasting the word. Yes, and that is precisely what troubles me. Dr. Shaw's voice was strained but steady. Inspector, I assure you, I did not kill Sir Alistair. Miss Sloane clicked her tongue. They always assure, do they not? Gryce rounded on her. Madam, I've half a mind. Poirot's hand rose gently. Inspector, may I speak with Dr. Shaw alone for a moment? In the interests of clarity, Gryce hesitated, then shrugged. 5 minutes, but don't expect special treatment. Poirot guided Shaw toward the corner of the room, away from listening ears, though I observed that Harrow's posture suggested he listened with his entire body regardless of distance. Poirot's tone was low, intimate. Doctor, you said Sir Alistair asked to see your dagger. Yes, and why would a man planning an announcement of great consequence concern himself with an ivory-hilted weapon? Shaw's mouth tightened. He said it reminded him of something, of a past he wished to put behind him. Poirot's eyes gleamed faintly. A past, always. It is the past that kills. Shaw's gaze flickered toward the others. Poirot, he was frightened. He told me someone was blackmailing him. He hinted that tonight he would end it, expose the matter publicly. Poirot's expression did not change, but I felt the air shift. Blackmail, Poirot murmured. And did he say who? No, only that it was someone here. Poirot nodded slowly. Merci, Doctor. That is enough. Gryce, watching, strode back. Well? Confession? Poirot smiled politely. Only information, Inspector. Information is more valuable than confession because it cannot be so easily manufactured. Gryce snorted. We'll see. Constable, keep an eye on Dr. Shaw. Dr. Shaw's jaw tightened, humiliation and anger mingling, but he said nothing. The guests dispersed in uneasy clusters, like birds after a gunshot. Cordelia sank into a chair, pale and rigid. Mrs. Croft paced, her silk gown whispering. Vetch hovered near the window, staring out at the grey sea. Harrow poured himself tea with maddening calm. Poirot approached Cordelia. Mademoiselle, may I see Sir Alistair's papers? The ones upon his desk. Cordelia blinked. Yes, of course. Inspector has not yet removed them. Upstairs, Poirot examined the desk again with exquisite care. He did not rummage. He merely observed, as though the arrangement itself spoke. The addressed envelope lay there still. To Mr. Julian Harrow, I read aloud, surprised. Harrow's name here, so near the dead man, sent a prickle down my spine. Poirot's eyes were thoughtful. And yet it was not sealed. Perhaps he hesitated, or perhaps he was interrupted. What could Sir Alistair have wished to write to Harrow? I asked. Poirot murmured. Perhaps an apology. Perhaps a threat. Perhaps an invitation to share guilt. He bent closer. There were faint impressions in the blotter, the ghost of words written and torn away. Poirot's finger hovered above them without touching. A letter begun, he murmured, and stopped. Below the desk, near the skirting board, the tiny glint I had seen earlier caught the light again. Poirot's gaze followed mine. Ah, Hastings, you noticed. He crouched carefully and, using his handkerchief, lifted the object. It was a small button, dark mother-of-pearl, with a thread still attached. A button, I said, from someone's clothing? Precisely, Poirot replied softly. And buttons do not fall off without reason. We returned downstairs just as Inspector Gryce emerged from the hallway, his expression grim. Another development, he announced. Everyone turned. Elsie stood behind him, trembling. Inspector, I didn't want to say, but I found something in the kitchen bin. Gryce held up a crumpled scrap of paper, stained with ash at the edges. A torn piece of letter, he said. Half burned. Looks like someone tried to destroy it. Poirot's eyes sharpened. May I? Gryce hesitated, then handed it over. Poirot smoothed it delicately. Only a few words remained legible, written in a bold hand. "If you speak tonight, you will not live to finish." A murmur swept the room. Cordelia pressed a hand to her throat. "A threat," she whispered. Mrs. Croft's voice was brittle. So he was warned. Poirot's gaze travelled slowly from face to face. "Yes," he said softly. He was warned, and yet he intended to speak. Harrow's voice cut through the tension, amused but edged now with something darker, and someone made certain he never did. Poirot's eyes rested on him. "Indeed, monsieur. The question is, who feared his words enough to silence him forever?" Outside, the lighthouse stood rigid against the sky, and the sea continued its endless, indifferent breathing, while within the guest house the circle tightened, each suspect trapped not only by walls but by secrets that had begun to surface, like drowned things rising. Poirot held the half-burned scrap as though it were a fragile insect pinned to a card, reading it again with that air of patient courtesy which, I knew, concealed an almost ruthless attention. Inspector Gryce watched him with suspicion. "Where did you find it?" Poirot asked Elsie. "In the kitchen bin, sir," she stammered. "Under the potato peelings. I was clearing up. I saw the writing, and I thought after what happened I ought to show someone." "You did well," Poirot said. "And when did you empty the bin last?" "After breakfast," Elsie replied. "About 10 o'clock." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "So the paper was placed there after 10, Gryce grunted. "Or before, and you missed it." Poirot smiled. "Possible, Inspector, but Elsie is conscientious, and the potato peelings are fresh. We will say after 10, yes?" Gryce turned to the room. "Right. Whoever wrote that threat has some explaining to do." Mrs. Croft lifted her chin. "Are we to be accused on the strength of a singed scrap?" "No," Poirot said gently. "We are to be questioned. Accusation is the inspector's pleasure. Understanding is mine." Harrow's gaze slid to Poirot. "And what do you understand so far?" "That someone wished Sir Alistair silent," Poirot replied. "But also that someone wished the rest of you to see an obvious culprit. The dagger in the cupboard. The note conveniently discovered. It is, how do you say, stage management." Miss Sloane gave a little delighted hiss. "Oh, so we are all actors, are we?" Poirot looked at her pleasantly. "Perhaps the one who enjoys the drama most." Colour rose in Miss Sloane's cheeks, but her eyes did not drop. Gryce snapped his notebook shut. "I'll start with the doctor. His weapon did the deed." "May I?" Poirot asked, and before Gryce could refuse, he continued. "Inspector, permit me to ask each person one question only. It will save time." Gryce hesitated, then waved a hand. "One question. Don't get clever." Poirot turned first to Mrs. Croft. "Madam, you cried last night. Why?" Mrs. Croft's nostrils flared. "I had a headache." "A headache makes tears." Poirot's tone was mild. Her composure wavered. "I received bad news." Poirot bowed slightly. "Then I will keep my curiosity." He moved to Simon Vetch. "Mr. Vetch, did Sir Alistair threaten to expose you?" Vetch swallowed hard. "He threatened to ruin me." "Yes. He said he had documents." "Documents," Poirot murmured. "And did you reply?" "I told him he was mistaken," Vetch said quickly. "I told him I would prove it." Poirot's eyes softened. Sincere people are often desperate people. He turned to Dr. Shaw. "Doctor, besides the dagger, what did Sir Alistair ask you for?" Shaw's mouth tightened. "Advice, medical advice?" "Yes, about illness." Shaw hesitated a fraction too long. "About fear," he said at last. Poirot nodded as though that were perfectly clear. He moved to Miss Sloane. "This morning, before you screamed, did you touch the door handle?" Miss Sloane blinked, then smiled. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I only looked in." Poirot's gaze held hers. "And yet you said the door was ajar. How did you see that without approaching?" Miss Sloane's smile tightened. It was obvious. Poirot let it drop. At last he faced Harrow. "Monsieur, Sir Alistair had begun a letter to you. What did you expect him to write?" Harrow's expression flickered. Irritation, amusement, then something guarded. If he wrote, it was his business. Poirot inclined his head. And if it concerned your business, monsieur? Harrow's eyes sharpened. You're fishing. I am always fishing, Poirot said serenely. Some fish bite, some do not. Gryce, impatient, stepped forward. That's enough. Constable, bring the doctor with me. We'll take statements properly. Dr. Shaw went pale. You intend to arrest me? Not yet, Gryce said. But you'll stay where I can see you. As they moved away, Poirot leaned toward me. Hastings, observe. The inspector is satisfied too easily. He wants a single thread to pull, and he does not ask why the thread is offered. And you? I murmured. I ask, Poirot said softly, who had the opportunity to take Dr. Shaw's dagger, to place it in the cupboard, and to write a threatening note in a bold hand. We were still speaking when a sharp crash came from upstairs, followed by Cordelia's strangled cry. Poirot was moving before I had fully risen. We raced up the stairs to find Cordelia at the open door of her office. Inside, the small room was in disarray, drawers pulled out, papers strewn, the little safe in the corner, standing open like a mouth. My master key, Cordelia whispered, white as chalk. It's gone. Poirot's eyes glittered. And so Hastings, the circle tightens. The murderer has not only killed, he searches now, perhaps for what Sir Alistair meant to reveal before the police stop him. Poirot stepped into Cordelia's office, as though entering a chapel after sacrilege. He did not glance first at the open safe, but at the door, the threshold, the carpet where a hurried foot might have scuffed the pile. Then he looked at the safe, small, iron, and now yawning emptily. You keep the master key here, he asked. Cordelia nodded, her fingers clutching the edge of the desk. In the safe. Always. I lock it after breakfast. I unlocked it earlier only to take petty cash for the butcher. Then I locked it again. I swear it. Inspector Gryce pushed past us, scowling at the disorder. What's all this? Poirot's tone stayed polite. Not theatrics, Inspector. The master key is missing. Gryce's eyes widened, then narrowed. So anyone can open any door in the house. Or at least, Poirot corrected gently, anyone who has it. Gryce swung toward Elsie, who hovered behind Cordelia with her apron clutched in both fists. You knew about this key. Only that Miss Cordelia has it, sir, Elsie said quickly. I never touched the safe. And you were out in the village until just now. Yes, sir. I came back with you, Gryce muttered under his breath, then barked at the constables in the corridor. No one goes anywhere alone. Pair up. Poirot knelt by the safe. On its rim, a faint grey smudge showed against the black metal. He touched his handkerchief to it and sniffed. Soap, he murmured. I blurted. Soap? Poirot rose, eyes bright. A hand freshly washed. Someone neat. Someone who, even in haste, could not bear to leave grease upon the metal. Cordelia gave a shaky laugh. Everyone washes their hands. Not everyone, Poirot said softly. At the same moments, Gryce snorted. You'll tell me next. The killer has a fondness for lavender. Poirot's eyes flickered toward him. It would not surprise me. They guided us back downstairs. The drawing room filled again with the suspect's restless energy. Mrs. Croft sat rigidly, her gaze fixed on the fire. Vetch gnawed at a fingernail, then seemed to remember himself and clenched his fists. Miss Sloane looked almost exhilarated. Harrow, maddeningly, appeared amused by the whole arrangement. The key is missing, Gryce announced, meaning someone's been nosing about, meaning we have a murderer still active in this house. A murderer who is also a thief, Miss Sloane said brightly. How efficient. Gryce glared. And we will find him. Now pockets, handbags, everything on the table. An outcry rose at once. Mrs. Croft protested loudly. Harrow lifted his brows. Vetch looked as though he might be sick. But the constables stood firm, and one by one the guests placed their belongings on the small writing table. A purse, a cigarette case, a fountain pen, gloves, a handkerchief embroidered with a crest. Poirot watched not the objects but the hands that relinquished them. Mrs. Croft's hands shook only when she set down a bundle of letters tied with ribbon. Vetch's fingers were ink-stained. Miss Sloane's nails were immaculate. Harrow's were bitten, in spite of his pose. Gryce rummaged. No key. Gryce's jaw worked. He stared at each face in turn, as if weighing them. In that moment I sensed the fear shiftless of discovery, more of being chosen next alone. Perhaps it's been hidden, Vetch said hoarsely, in a plant pot, under a rug. Poirot nodded as though humouring a child. Perhaps. Cordelia drew a breath. If someone has the master key, they could have entered Sir Alistair's room while he ate breakfast. They could have taken the missing document, and then returned later to kill him. Gryce finished. Yes. Poirot's gaze softened on Cordelia. When Sir Alistair told you a document was missing, did he say what kind? Cordelia shook her head. Only that it was decisive. Decisive, Poirot repeated. A word of endings. At that moment, from the hallway came the thin ring of the telephone, so sudden in the heavy atmosphere that everyone started. Cordelia half rose, but Gryce gestured, and a constable went to answer. After a moment he returned, face stiff. It's for Inspector Gryce, from London. Gryce seized the receiver. We heard only fragments, but his expression changed. First incredulity, then anger, then a kind of wary satisfaction. He slammed the phone down. Well, he said slowly. That's interesting. Poirot's head tilted. Something new, Inspector? Gryce looked at Dr. Shaw, who stood between the constables like a man trying not to show he was caged. Sir Alistair wasn't just any wealthy gentleman. Scotland Yard says he was due to give evidence tomorrow morning in a blackmail case. Names, details. A tremor ran through the room. Mrs. Croft's face went very white indeed. Poirot's voice was gentle as velvet. And now, he said, someone has ensured he will give no evidence at all. Poirot's last words fell like a small stone dropped into deep water. The ripples were immediate. Mrs. Croft's mouth opened, closed. Her fingers tightened on the arms of her chair until the knuckles shone. Vetch stared at the carpet as if it might open and swallow him. Miss Sloane's eyes glittered, not with fear but with triumph, as though she had long suspected the world would provide her a spectacle. Harrow for once stopped smiling. Inspector Gryce planted his hands on his hips. You lot hear that? Blackmail. He was to name names, which means every one of you may have had reason to stop him. That is absurd, Mrs. Croft said, and the steadiness of her voice was a shade too carefully arranged. I have never been blackmailed in my life. Poirot's gaze rested on her with polite interest. Never, madam. Not even by circumstance. She flinched, as though the word circumstance had teeth. Gryce pointed at Dr. Shaw. And you, Doctor? Why would Sir Alistair consult you, eh? If he's got some secret to hide. Shaw's jaw tightened. He did not consult me about secrets. He asked about anxiety, about sleeping. He said he had nightmares of being exposed. Gryce snapped. Poirot interposed gently. Inspector, if Sir Alistair wished to be rid of blackmail, he would seek courage as much as sleep. A doctor can supply neither, but he can listen. Gryce grunted, unconvinced. We'll see what your little listening produces, Poirot. Poirot turned to Cordelia. Mademoiselle, would you be so kind as to tell us at breakfast, where did each guest sit? Cordelia blinked at the oddity of the question, then answered automatically, as if grateful for something practical. Sir Alistair sat at the head, by the window. Mrs. Croft was to his right, Mr. Harrow opposite her. Dr. Shaw to Sir Alistair's left, Miss Sloane at the far end. Mr. Vetch beside her. Poirot nodded. And the service? Tea, coffee, toast? Tea and coffee both. Marmalade. Kippers. Cordelia's voice shook on the last word, then steadied. Elsie served. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the post? The post comes at 9:30, Cordelia said. I bring it in and place it on the hall table. And this morning? Poirot asked. Cordelia hesitated. It was there, I remember, because Sir Alistair asked if there was anything for him. And was there? Cordelia's gaze slid away. Yes, a letter. Harrow's head lifted, quick as a striking match. From whom? Cordelia swallowed. I did not look closely. Poirot's voice stayed mild. But you noticed enough to remember it. Describe the envelope. It was cream, she said slowly, with a red wax seal. He seemed displeased. Poirot's moustache twitched. A wax seal. Very ceremonial, very old-fashioned. And after breakfast, where did Sir Alistair go? To his room, Cordelia said. At once. Carrying the letter? Yes. Poirot glanced at Gryce. Inspector, may I see the victim's room again? Now, after this information, Gryce waved a hand. Fine. But don't touch anything, and don't waste my time. Upstairs, the room felt colder, as though the dead man's absence had created a vacuum. Poirot stood by the desk and looked, not at the papers but at the wastebasket. It was empty. He lifted the lid and examined the lining, then straightened. No ash, he murmured. You mean the threat note wasn't burned here? I asked. Poirot's eyes shone. Perhaps it was burned elsewhere. But more interesting, there is no torn wax seal, no ripped envelope. If Sir Alistair received a sealed letter at 9:30, where is it now? I looked helplessly at the desk. Someone took it. Or Sir Alistair hid it, Poirot corrected. But he was killed 10 minutes after ringing for Cordelia. In that time, would he hide or would he confront? Poirot moved to the fireplace. The grate held only cold cinders, but tucked behind the andiron lay a thin curl of something pale. With his handkerchief he drew it out, a fragment of cream paper, edged with red wax. Poirot's breath was almost a sigh. So, here is the ghost of the letter. And the rest? Poirot tilted his head toward the corridor. With the master key, we returned downstairs to find Gryce in the middle of barking orders. Search every room again, he said. Every drawer, every suitcase. If that key is in this house, we find it. Harrow's voice cut in, silky. And if it's not in the house, Inspector? Gryce glared. Then someone's thrown it over the cliff. Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, to the grey seam where sea met sky, and his expression grew thoughtful, almost tender. Or, he said softly, someone carries it close, because it opens more than doors. It opens reputations and futures and the past itself. And someone is already watching us. Inspector Gryce's search party tramped through the guest house like an invading army. Drawers were pulled, cushions lifted, suitcases opened with little regard for dignity. The sound of it, thuds, murmurs, the scratch of pencil on notebook, made the house feel less like a refuge and more like a cage being rattled. Poirot did not join the rummaging. He remained in the drawing room, inviting the suspects to sit, to drink tea, to pretend at normality. It was, I realized, his way of forcing their nerves to speak. People can endure questioning. They struggle to endure waiting. Mrs. Croft sat upright, her letters clasped to her lap as though they were a shield. Vetch hovered near the mantel, staring into cold ashes. Miss Sloane, pleased, kept glancing toward the hallway as if hoping to hear another scream. Harrow lounged by the window, watching the constables outside as they searched the cliff path for anything thrown down. Poirot's eyes came to rest on Vetch's fingers. You write much, mister. Vetch. Vetch blinked. What? You have ink upon the nails. Vetch looked down, flushed. I keep notes. For business. Poirot nodded. And you use a fountain pen? Yes. Black ink. Of course. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, of course. Gryce returned at last, irritated and empty-handed. Nothing, he snapped. No key, no letter, no confession. But we have the doctor's dagger, and that's enough for a charge if I choose. Doctor Shaw's face went grey. Inspector. Poirot interposed. Before you choose, Inspector, permit me one small experiment. Gryce scowled. No parlour tricks, Poirot said mildly. Only psychology. He turned to Cordelia. Mademoiselle, please bring me the guest register. Cordelia obeyed, returning with a leather-bound book. Poirot set it on the table and opened it with reverence. He ran his finger down the recent entries. Julian Harrow, he read softly. Lavinia Croft, Edmund Shaw, Beatrice Sloane, Simon Vetch. His finger paused. And Sir Alistair Pembroke. He closed the book. Each of you signed. Each of you wrote your own name in your own hand. Inspector. May I borrow your pencil? Gryce tossed it over. Poirot took a blank sheet and very carefully copied the few surviving words from the burned threat. If you speak tonight, you will not live to finish. He then placed the sheet beside the register. Now, Poirot said gently, we compare, not for legal proof. No, no, but for the little habits, the slant, the pressure, the manner of forming certain letters. Miss Sloane gave a delighted little clap. Like graphology, Gryce snorted. Rubbish. Perhaps, Poirot agreed, but even rubbish may hide something sharp. He bent over the register. Observe, Inspector, the word tonight. See the crossing of the T, high and impatient. Who crosses the T so? Monsieur Harrow? No, his strokes are lazy. Madame Croft? Precise, low, controlled. Dr. Shaw? Small, careful. Mademoiselle Sloane? Spidery. Mr. Vetch? Poirot's eyes lifted. Poirot's eyes lifted. Your ties are crossed high. Vetch's mouth opened. That means nothing. Not alone, Poirot agreed. But it means something with other somethings. Gryce leaned in despite himself, then jerked back. Coincidence. Any clerk crosses high. Poirot nodded. Then let us add the paper. The threat was written on thick cream stationery, yes? The same quality as the envelope with the wax seal. Such paper is not common in a seaside village. Who among you carries fine stationery? Croft's fingers tightened on her letters. Harrow's gaze sharpened. Miss Sloane's eyes slid toward Cordelia, and Vetch looked for one naked instant toward his coat pocket. Poirot's voice was velvet. Ah, Vetch sprang up. This is absurd. You're trying to make me nervous. My dear sir, Poirot said softly, I do not try. You do it yourself. At that moment a constable appeared at the door. Inspector, we found something by the lighthouse steps. Gryce strode out. We followed to the wind-battered path that led toward the old tower. Halfway down, in a crack between stones, lay a small object glinting dully, a metal key attached to a narrow strip of red ribbon. Cordelia gasped. That's it. That's my ribbon. I tied it to the master key. Gryce snatched it up triumphantly. So it was meant to be thrown away, but it caught. Now we're getting somewhere. He swung back toward the group, eyes hard. Which of you was near the lighthouse? Harrow shrugged. I was on the terrace. I could have walked there. Miss Sloane smiled. Anyone could have walked there. Poirot's gaze stayed on the key and ribbon, thoughtful. Yes, he murmured. Anyone. That is why it was placed there, not lost, but displayed. A message. I have it, and now I do not. And behind that message, another. Someone wishes us to look outward, to the cliff and the sea, while the true evidence remains within the house. And all the while the killer watches, smiling. Poirot's remark seemed to annoy Gryce more than any contradiction. The inspector liked objects that pointed like arrows. Poirot preferred objects that lied. Displayed, eh? Gryce said, squinting at the ribbon, or dropped by a clumsy hand. It is possible, Poirot agreed, but the ribbon is torn, not cut. A man in haste does not tear a ribbon neatly. A man who wishes to suggest haste does. Gryce grunted. You can suggest whatever you like. I have a murder weapon, a threatened witness, and a key near the lighthouse. That's a case. A case, Poirot murmured, is not the same as the truth. Back inside, the constables returned the guests to the drawing-room. The wind had risen, and each gust made the windows shiver. Cordelia hovered by the sideboard, trembling between hostess and victim. Dr. Shaw sat rigidly, hands clasped. Miss Sloane knitted her needles, clicking with deliberate cheer. Harrow watched her with a novelist's curiosity. Vetch rose, paced 2 steps, sat again. Gryce dropped the bagged key on the table. Right. We'll start again. Dr. Shaw, you're still my prime suspect. Poirot leaned toward me. Observe, Hastings, the inspector tightens the net around the wrong fish, but the net tightens and the fish panic. Gryce called Dr. Shaw into the hall. The door closed. The drawing-room became a pressure chamber. In the silence I heard Miss Sloane's needles, the crackle of coal, and under everything Vetch's breathing. Poirot rose and crossed to the window, peering out at the lighthouse tower. It is curious, he said mildly, how an old lighthouse governs a place long after its light has gone out. No one replied, and yet some people need a light. Poirot continued. They do not like to be in the dark. Mrs. Croft's voice cut in. What are you implying, Monsieur Poirot? Nothing, madame, Poirot said pleasantly. I am only thinking aloud. Harrow's laugh was low. That's what sharks do before they bite. Poirot's smile did not change. Ah, monsieur, you mistake me. I am Belgian. A clatter in the hall. Gryce's voice rising, Shaw's controlled reply ended as the door opened. Dr. Shaw returned, paler than before. Gryce followed, satisfied. Doctor says he never left the sitting room between 10 and the scream, Gryce announced. And Elsie backs him up. She saw him there when she came in. So you're not free yet, Doctor, but you're less interesting. Shaw exhaled, as though permitted one sip of air. Gryce jabbed a finger toward Vetch. Your turn. Vetch stood too quickly, bumping the chair. As he passed Poirot, Poirot's eyes flicked down just once to the man's coat pocket. Vetch noticed. His hand flew there, guarding it. Poirot said nothing. When Vetch vanished into the hall, Poirot turned to Cordelia. Mademoiselle, the stationery in this house, where is it kept? In my office, she whispered. In the top drawer. It was disturbed. And the red wax for seals? I have a stick of sealing wax there, Cordelia said faintly. It was there yesterday. And today. I did not look. Then we will look, Poirot said. We went upstairs with Cordelia. In the office, Poirot opened the drawer carefully. The stationery lay in neat piles, but one pile was short. The sealing wax was gone. Cordelia gave a small stricken sound. Poirot held an envelope to the light. See, Hastings, this paper has a watermark. A lighthouse. How appropriate. Then the threat note was written on the guesthouse paper, Poirot finished. And the sealed letter at the hall table could have been made here as well. Someone wished Sir Alistair to believe it came from elsewhere. Cordelia clutched the desk. But why? Because a man who thinks he is trapped by a stranger may seek help, Poirot said softly. A man who suspects he is trapped by someone here may do something rash, like announce names. From below came a shout. Poirot's head lifted. We hurried down to find Gryce standing over Vetch, who sat in a chair like a collapsed puppet. On the table lay a fountain pen, a sheaf of thick cream paper, and most damning, a stub of red sealing wax. Gryce's face was triumphant. Found in his pocket, along with a draft letter addressed to Sir Alistair Pembroke. Mr. Vetch says it's business. Poirot looked at the paper, then at Vetch's sweating face. Business, he murmured. Yes, the business of fear. Vetch's voice broke. I didn't kill him. I only wanted to scare him. He was going to destroy me. Poirot's gaze sharpened, but his tone stayed soft. And what, exactly, was he going to say tonight, Mr. Vetch? Tell us, here, in front of everyone. It is time the dark had some light. Around us the others leaned in, hungry or terrified, and I saw Poirot's eyes glitter. At last someone's secret would speak out loud. Vetch's confession hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking. For a moment no one moved. Even Miss Sloane's knitting needles paused, suspended mid-click. Inspector Gryce leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a man who believes the puzzle solved. So, he said harshly, you admit it. You wrote the threat. You had the wax. You stole the key. That's enough for me. Vetch shook violently. No, I admit I threatened him. Yes, but I didn't stab him. I swear it. I only wanted time. I only wanted him to delay. Poirot's voice was very gentle. Time, Mr. Vetch, is the one thing murder always provides for everyone except the victim. Gryce snapped. You'll have plenty of time in prison. But Poirot's eyes were not on Gryce. They were on the others, on Mrs. Croft's rigid posture, on Harrow's stillness, on Miss Sloane's sharp attention. Poirot said softly, Mr. Vetch, you wished to scare Sir Alistair. Why? Vetch swallowed. His voice came out in a broken rush. He had proof. Proof that my company was built on fraud. I borrowed money I couldn't repay. I thought I could fix it, but he found out. He said tonight he would name me, ruin me completely. Cordelia gasped. Poirot nodded. So you wrote the threatening note? Yes. You used the guesthouse paper. You even took the sealing wax, to make it seem official, dramatic, irresistible. Vetch covered his face. I wanted him frightened, not dead. Poirot turned slightly. And yet, Mr. Vetch, you have done something more than frighten him. You have provided the murderer with exactly what was needed. Gryce frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Poirot's voice remained calm. A convenient villain. Silence. Poirot walked slowly to the table where the fountain pen lay. He picked it up delicately with his handkerchief. "Inspector, you see ink stains on Mr. Vetch's fingers, you see sealing wax in his pocket, and you think, voila, the killer." Gryce bristled. "It's evidence." "It is evidence," Poirot agreed. "But evidence can be arranged. People can be pushed into leaving footprints they never meant to leave." Poirot's gaze swept the room. Someone here knew Mr. Vetch was desperate. Someone here understood that desperation could be shaped into guilt. Mrs. Croft's voice cut like glass. "This is absurd. Are you suggesting some elaborate plot?" Poirot looked at her. "Madame, I am suggesting precisely that." He turned to Inspector Gryce. "Let us return to the beginning. Sir Alistair came here because he wished to speak tonight. He wished to end blackmail. He received a letter sealed with wax, an invented letter created from within this house to push him toward fear," Cordelia whispered. "And the missing document?" Poirot nodded. "The document was decisive. It was proof. Proof not only against Mr. Vetch, but against someone else, someone whose ruin would be far greater." Dr. Shaw spoke hoarsely. "Mrs. Croft." Every head turned. Mrs. Croft rose slowly, her face pale but proud. "You are all mad." Poirot's voice softened. "Madam Croft, last night you cried. Not from headache, from terror. Sir Alistair intended to expose you." Mrs. Croft's eyes flashed. "Expose me for what?" Poirot's tone was mercilessly polite. "For being the true subject of the blackmail case." A murmur swept the room. Poirot continued, each word placed like a chess piece. "You are not merely a fashionable widow. You were once Lavinia Pembroke." Cordelia gave a strangled sound. Mrs. Croft froze. Poirot nodded sadly. "Yes, Sir Alistair's first wife. Divorced quietly, scandal buried. But not forgotten. Sir Alistair held something against you. Proof of the affair that ended the marriage, proof that could destroy your position forever." Mrs. Croft's lips trembled. Harrow murmured. "Now it becomes interesting." Poirot's eyes flicked to him. "And you, monsieur, knew, the novelist who observes everything. Sir Alistair began a letter to you because you were helping Lavinia. You were not merely a guest, you were her ally." Harrow's smile vanished. Poirot went on. "Mrs. Croft could not risk exposure. She learned Mr. Vetch was desperate. She encouraged his fear, let him write threats, let him steal keys, and when Sir Alistair rang for Cordelia this morning, Lavinia entered his room with Dr. Shaw's dagger." Mrs. Croft's voice cracked. "No." Poirot lifted a hand. "You stabbed him quickly. Then you placed the dagger in the linen cupboard so suspicion would fall upon Dr. Shaw. You tore away the key's ribbon and later placed it near the lighthouse to suggest disposal, and you burned the threat note fragment so it would be discovered at the perfect time." Gryce shouted. "That's a fine story, Poirot, but where's your proof?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The button." Everyone stared. Poirot stepped forward and placed the mother-of-pearl button on the table. "Found near the desk, torn off in struggle. Mrs. Croft, look at your dressing gown." For the first time, Lavinia Croft's composure shattered. Her hand flew to her collar. One button was missing. A sound escaped her, half sob, half laugh. "It was supposed to be finished," she whispered. "I was supposed to be free." Poirot's voice softened, almost pitying. "Murder does not free, madame. It only binds tighter." Gryce's face darkened. He nodded sharply to the constables. "Mrs. Croft." "Lavinia Pembroke, you are under arrest." She did not resist. Her shoulders sagged, elegance collapsing into exhaustion. As she was led away, she turned once toward Poirot. "You understand so much," she said bitterly. "Do you ever hate what you see?" Poirot's eyes were grave. "I do not hate, madame. I regret. Always I regret." The guest house felt strangely hollow afterward, as though the lighthouse itself had exhaled. Later, as Poirot and I stood by the cliff, the sea roaring below, I said quietly, "You knew from the beginning." Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings, I only knew that everyone here had something to hide. The little grey cells simply arranged the hiding places. And Vetch—" "A frightened man," Poirot murmured. Poirot murmured, "He played with fire, and another used the flame." Poirot adjusted his coat against the wind and looked once more at the silent tower. "The lighthouse was built to guide men away from danger," he said softly. "But even the brightest light cannot prevent a man from walking into darkness if his own heart leads him there." Then, with impeccable composure, Hercule Poirot turned away. "Come, mon ami," he said. "England is too damp. Let us go somewhere orderly." And the Lighthouse Guesthouse, with all its secrets, was left behind, quiet once more, as though it had never screamed at all.